In this video, I'm going to tell you what properties to never, ever buy in your real estate journey. Now, I have seen investors make all kinds of mistakes. I made some of these mistakes. So I'm going to share some of those stories with you and just kind of explain why you don't want to buy these types of properties. It's a sure way to lose money. All right, so let's get right into it. All right, so this is a really embarrassing story. Okay, I've got a really embarrassing story. I bought a house. It was actually had two of these marks against it. So I made this huge mistake. I bought this house. I was wholesaling, but there were times when I would just tuck some properties away and keep them for myself. And I bought this property. I really couldn't sell it, and I couldn't sell it quickly. And so I was like, I'll just keep it for rental. This thing had no driveway. Like no parking, no driveway. It literally had a yard that went to the street, and on either side of the property of the house was like just two other houses. And so people had to go, there's a multifamily apartment complex not far away. They had to go and park there and then walk to the property. How well do you think I rented that property? Not very well. It was horrible, bad mistake. So this is a big no-no. If you find that you have no parking, limited parking, that's a place it's not going to be easy to rent. People aren't going to stay there very long. If they did sign your lease, I can tell you they'll be gone in 12 months. This is what happened to me. I had people in there. They never stayed, had trouble re-renting it. Not very good. And so I would say just make sure you have plenty of parking. It's very important. And then I'll talk about the second problem that this house was on here. And some of you may have bought these types of houses, but I would say steer away from anything that doesn't have plenty of parking and convenience for your resident. All right. Unrealistic seller promises. Now, this one's a lot harder to really understand because you have to, if you're buying something from a seller, you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. Trust but verify. You want to make sure that what they're telling you is the truth, right? So if you receive information from a wholesaler or an investor or even a realtor, whatever, and they're estimating what you can rent this property for, this thing should rent for $2,000 all day long. You need to verify that. You need to find a property manager in the area. You need to find another investor in the area, somebody who has a really good understanding. Don't just take seller promises or seller promises that nothing's wrong with the property, right? You know, they can't guarantee rent. They can't tell you future appreciation of the property or a future appreciation of the rent. And listen, I'm saying here they're often hiding issues. Not everybody's hiding issues. Again, trust but verify. So don't think that everybody is doing this, but you could have bad residents in there. You could have structural problems. If you're buying a property that has a resident in there, you need to do an inspection. Don't ignore that, because what you're buying, what you're inheriting, you're probably inheriting deferred maintenance. Probably at the very least. If you're just depending on where you're buying, you're buying some deferred maintenance. So you're going to have to do work when that resident moves out. There's no doubt about it. I've even bought Section 8 properties that had deferred maintenance, and you would think, well, Section 8, they do an inspection every year, and they do. However, it doesn't matter. They don't always catch everything. And if you have deferred maintenance, that if you would have fixed it right off the bat, wouldn't have turned into thousands of dollars worth of damage. This is the way it happened. So just be careful. Misleading income statements, they ought to be able to produce a rent roll. That rent roll should show you exactly how much they collected. I know that we here at Evernest produce rent rolls when people are buying properties. We've got a lot of investors, and so they will sell properties to other investors of ours. There's all kinds of things, but we're always providing rent rolls. And we're like, hey, here's exactly if there were any late fees charged, if they were late, what they owe, what they currently owe, how up to date they are, how consistent they've been in their paying. You need to know all of this stuff. And this is one of those things when if a seller can't provide you with the basics and very objective reality of what's going on in that property, then you don't need to buy it. Just move on. This is all about patience. Again, success is not about what you say yes to, it's about what you say no to. All right, next one are just high vacancy properties. So I know that everybody loves a deal. Everybody loves to buy properties for a deal. However, I'm going to warn you, if there's been a property and it's been vacant for a very long time and people are having trouble selling it, don't think just because they lower the price a little bit and it falls within your range that you're going to be a magician. There's a reason why it's probably been vacant for a very long time. Now, this could be because the owner of the property didn't want to fix it up. They didn't want to get it in rent-ready condition. That's possible, and maybe all you have to do is get it in rent-ready condition. But it could be that, you know what, it's on a really bad street and residents don't want to rent that property because maybe they have a burnout next to them, or maybe they have abandoned houses across the street or something like that. Great residents want to live on great streets. That's why you have to really get granular, not only at looking at the market and not only looking at the zip code, but then you need to look at the street. You need to know the street. You need to know the neighborhood. You need to be able to tell what's on that street and in that neighborhood even before you look at the house. But I would just be careful. It could be that it's in a poor location or the property's in really bad shape. I mean, this is the thing. We have, in a lot of these markets, you have 100-year-old houses. If you're buying in some of these low to moderate income areas, they have really old properties. And so if you're buying a house that's 100 years old, I mean, you just have to be careful because these things need work. They can also attract vandalism if they're not in a great area. If they're in a high crime area, they could attract vandalism. People, squatters living in houses. We've had those situations. This is always going to cost you additional money. And then ultimately you got to wonder, how's this street, or does the street need to turn around? Is that going to be possible? What are the chances of that happening? I think just be realistic. Especially if this is like one of your first rental properties, don't go taking big risks on a property that's been hanging around for a long, long time. You don't want to do that. All right, this is the other bad part of the house that I bought that had no driveway. It also was a 2-bedroom. Like, huge fail, double whammy there. Don't know why I did it. I have owned I've owned actually a pretty decent 2-bedroom. I had a 2-bedroom a while ago and had a resident in there. They lived there for probably 3 or 4 years. They were great. They paid on time. But what I found out is that most people don't really want, I've had more than one. I've had a few 2-bedroom. One had a resident and she was great. Now, she complained about everything, but that's okay. I mean, she wanted things done at the house, which is great, but she stayed there for like 7 or 8 years. So I'll have to say, I'll never forget her name. Tara was fantastic. However, if somebody lives in a 2-bedroom property and they start a family they just don't want to stay in a smaller house. We're talking, most of these houses are below 1,000 square feet for the most part, just depending on where in the country you're buying these. And I would just say, be careful if you ever want to buy a 2-bedroom house. I think the perfect rental property is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And I love the square footage, around 1,500 square feet. Like, that's the perfect rental house. It's enough for people to live in, to have a family in. And I just like those. I don't like 2-bedrooms. Lower income, obviously, you're going to pay less for it. Harder to sell for people if you have a family. It's going to be harder to rent to them. Again, it just limits your pool of residents. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to limit your pool of residents. You want to make it as wide as possible, right? So you don't want the most expensive. You don't want the cheapest. All right, non-landlord friendly states. Now, got to be careful here because we manage properties all over the place. We manage properties all over the country almost. Not in every state yet. However, and I know that people find success renting properties, having rental properties all over the U.S. I know California to New York, Chicago, big city, small city, doesn't really matter. However, if you are just getting into this, why not start off in a place where it's more landlord friendly. I was just interviewing a property manager the other day. This guy, business owner, owns this company in San Diego, and he manages 1,200 rental properties in San Diego. Super nice guy. And he was just talking about, hey, we didn't have to do a ton of marketing because with all of the restrictions on landlords and all the laws that came out, it's like everybody needs a professional for the most part. You really need a professional to navigate these things and stay up to date with all the changes in the state of California, specifically where he was in San Diego. So, you know what? I would prefer a landlord-friendly state, somewhere probably in the Midwest, Southeast, somewhere like that. That's just my preference. But again, if you're somewhere out west, Northwest, Northeast, you can 100% do this. But I just think it does add to the complexity of owning rental property, in my opinion. Not to mention that these places are usually pretty expensive, as you see right here in the great state of California. Love California. So beautiful. I know why people pay money to live there, because it's so beautiful. But when you're building a rental portfolio, it can become a little bit more challenging than somewhere else. So that's just another one I would say. What about overly large properties? And what I mean by overly large properties is, and I might have could have found a better picture because the house next to it looks about the same size, but what I mean is properties that are bigger than every other property in the neighborhood. Why do you want to be the biggest property? It's not good. They're harder to sell. They're harder to rent. They're more expensive to keep up, right? So maintenance cost is going to be more expensive. Rental income is better, right? But guess what? It oftentimes doesn't justify the increased expenses, and it's going to be harder for you to rent. It's going to take, let me see if I can draw a clock here. That's the clock. It's going to take you a lot longer to rent that property because not as many people are looking for the big house in a normal neighborhood. So I would just stay away from the biggest property. Fewer residents are looking for the biggest house. I just, again, also something else to know is in some of these places, you can find really old houses that are really big. What I mean is they have high ceilings because back 100 years ago, they didn't have central heat and air, right? And so they had these high ceilings, and you just got to be careful buying those houses as well. They may not be the biggest square foot, but they have the highest ceilings. So there's all kinds of things that you have to think about. You really want to buy, in my opinion, if I were you, I would want to buy a cookie cutter house as much as possible. There's a reason why D.R. Horton and these national home builders have the same floor plans everywhere they go. You should probably go look at, if you know of any build-to-rent neighborhoods near you, and these are essentially planned communities, hundreds of houses that are built for residents only. They're going to rent the entire area. So go look at build-to-rent and see what kind of floor plans they have, see what kind of, it's just very cookie-cutter stuff. They never build massive houses in build-to-rent communities, not because people are mostly not looking to do that. All right, this should go without saying. Properties in declining areas. Everybody wants a comeback story, and we've had several. Everybody's had several. I was talking with an investor in Columbus, Ohio, and she was just talking about how great it was to see different areas really like revitalize and come to life, and man, rents went up and property values went up and investors are super happy, and I can see that. I think that's fantastic. The challenge is that sometimes people are just guessing, right? Sometimes people are just guessing that this area is going to come back. So we had an area in our town called Avondale. We had a real estate investor who we know, and he single-handedly, essentially revitalized this entire area called Avondale. He bought a building, created a brewery, and the brewery was a smash hit. And he then he bought up other buildings, started doing some commercial development. Then other restaurants came in, and the place is gangbusters, and it's fantastic. However, what I saw were investors going, hey, what's the next Avondale? I'm going to start buying in this area. And then it never comes back. I'm going to buy in this area, and it never comes back. It was on the decline, and they just believe that, hey, more and more people are going to buy here. It's, just a couple miles away from this area, Avondale, and it didn't work like that. Other areas did. Just have to be careful. The temptation is that you can usually find pretty good deals in these areas. You can usually find somebody, a motivated seller. That's what you're looking for, a motivated seller, somebody who's ready to get out, who's ready to sell the thorn in their side property. You don't want to buy it because it's going to be a big pain in your butt too. So stay away from these areas. High vacancy, lower long-term appreciation, fewer potential buyers. It just really is not good. I've seen so many investors sell at a loss when they bought thinking that the whole area was going to turn around. And the crazy thing is that in some of these areas, it could be literally 5 blocks. You could be 5 blocks away from transformation, but your area of the place does not come back. I knew an investor who bought a bunch of houses, and he bought on a road. And when he told me the road he bought on, I was like, "Ugh, that's not." But he was enamored with this area that was supposed to be coming back, and I was like, "Yeah, further up the hill things are coming back, but down here in the kind of the flat plains of where you bought, that's a real busy road. I just don't see that's not very attractive for great residents." And so anyway, he ended up losing money on the deal. So that's it. Those were the ones that I thought of. The 7, I think we have 7 here. Limited parking, no parking, unrealistic seller promises, high vacancy, 2-bedroom houses, non-landlord friendly states, overly large properties, and properties in declining areas. That's a pretty good list. I mean, that's the crazy thing is, like I said at the beginning of this, real estate, so much of success in real estate is what to avoid, knowing when to say no. And you should be saying no a lot more than you say yes. You're looking for the best properties for you, depending on your goals. And so stick with your guns. Don't get overly anxious to buy houses and go and make a mistake like what's on this page right here. Don't do it. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll be back with more investor-friendly videos just like this.